Hello, welcome to another episode of Inside the Huddle. Today is Sunday, March 9th. This is episode 54 of the Inside the Huddle podcast. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Make sure to please like and subscribe. Appreciate the support. Off-season rolls on. It feels like the beginning of the off-season action now. Tomorrow, March 10th, is the official start of the legal tampering period for NFL free agency. So kind of the unofficial start of NFL free agency, with the official league year beginning on March 12th. So get a ton of signings this week, ton of free agency action. Start to get a better idea of where each team stands, to get a better idea of where these rosters will stand going into the draft in April. So exciting times ahead. Lots to discuss today on the podcast. Already a ton of moves. DiMari, how's it going, man?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I think you set it up perfectly. It's been quite the week with some news. Kind of reminds me of like at the NBA trade line, so many different moving pieces, so many different stories. Usually that's not what we get from the NFL, but we were lucky this year around. So, like you said, legal tampering period starts tomorrow. Obviously, this past week has been pretty busy. I'm assuming it even more busy this week coming up when the new league year does start on Wednesday. But that's going to be something to watch out for. But let's get into what, we kind of got this previous week, because it's been a lot of surprises, I can say.
Yeah, definitely. Two big stories come out of this week. I don't know if we necessarily saw these coming at the beginning of the week, or even saw these coming at any point in the offseason. So we'll go in chronological order. We'll start with the first big one, and that is Geno Smith going to the Raiders. Happens Friday night. Little Friday night news dump in the NFL. Always a surprise. Geno Smith gets traded to Vegas. Seattle in return get a third-round pick, 92nd overall. So Geno reunites with Pete Carroll. They, of course, spent 2 seasons together in Seattle. Pete Carroll gets his quarterback, and it looks like Geno could be getting an extension anywhere towards 40 to 45 million, which is kind of where the quarterback market is at right now with Vegas. And it feels like that's their guy that they're going to roll with here for the next couple seasons. Pete Carroll is an older coach, and he's probably wants a quarterback. There certainly is probably an influence on trying to get a quarterback, not necessarily drafting a rookie and trying to develop them, but getting a quarterback that can help them win now, as opposed to, with Carroll getting up in age, going after a younger guy and banking on them to, develop into a star, whether that was Shedeur or somebody like that. We heard that they were going after Stafford. So they make this trade here. It makes a lot of sense from the Raiders' perspective, and I'll ask your thoughts now. I don't really we have to see how it plays out, I guess, from Seattle's perspective. But the Raiders, I like it a lot. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Geno's had his ups and downs. Even this past season, you had some very good Geno, and you had some not so great Geno. But I think for the Raiders' sake, I mean, he will be 35 in October, which isn't still, it's still not too bad. And I think you kind of set it up perfectly with, Pete Carroll being an older guy. It's like, do you want to go draft a quarterback and, maybe you wait 3 to 4 years to develop that guy? When Pete Carroll, I think we talked about it before, like, hey, what if it's only like a 2 to 3 year type of thing? And, he moves on from there. And from Geno, obviously, you can trust Geno. You can win now. And we talk about it so often. Inside that division with that quarterback play, you need somebody that is going to at least be able to keep you afloat and compete. And didn't think I'll be saying this, in the offseason of 2025. But when you do have a Bo Nix, you have to beat twice a year. And, Bo Nix and obviously Herbert is viewed differently around the league.
Yeah.
Patty Mahomes is Patty Mahomes.
Yeah.
I mean, you need somebody that is going to step in there, be a leader, and win instantly. So I think Geno is a great fit for that. And I mean, it was kind of time for Seattle to clean house. And I think you mentioned it 2 episodes ago where this might be a possibility when the DK trade kind of surfaced around and what might happen there. So comes no surprise for Seattle. They want to get younger and move on. Don't blame them, but I'm glad the Raiders got their guy. And I mean, we say it all the time. You get one guy in there, maybe you can get some free agents that want to build and play with him and, see what they can do. So I expect the Raiders to be very busy, at least for this upcoming week.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I mean, you're totally right. This time last offseason, we were making fun of the Broncos quarterback room because we were saying you got Mahomes and Herbert. We were making fun of the Raiders too because they were rolling Minshew and Aiden O'Connell out there. And that's, I think, the biggest thing too. Look, like you mentioned, Geno's, he's not perfect. He has his moments, but he was still fourth in yards last year. He's a guy that's more than capable at this point in his career, having this renaissance of throwing 20 plus touchdowns. He had 30 touchdowns just 2 years ago. He got Seattle to the playoffs. He's a massive upgrade over what the Raiders have been dealing with. And I also think this just sends the right message to the Raiders locker room. You bring in a head coach that's a Super Bowl winner, a proven head coach that can come in and turn an organization around right away. Now you go and extend Max Crosby, one of your own, which is the right move. And I also think it sends the right message to him, too, as a guy who has been, I feel bad for Max Crosby. I mean, he's phenomenal and his talent's been wasted there. But now he gets Geno. It feels like Crosby was pushing for a veteran because you even heard some of his comments. I believe it was on Rodgers about him potentially going there. He wanted a veteran, I think, as opposed to putting your faith in a rookie and hoping that they pan out in this class that, a lot of people are skeptical about. It sends the right message. Geno's a guy that can come in and do it. And I'm happy for Geno. I think most fans should be. It's been cool to see his renaissance. He's going to get a big paycheck now, and he deserves it. And they need a quarterback in that division. You need to have a somewhat competent quarterback in that division, especially like you said, with the rise of Bo Nix, which is hard to say with a straight face, but there's a chance Bo Nix might be better than Herbert at the end of this year. There really is a chance that we might have that conversation. You're never going to survive with the O'Connell. You're never going to survive with Minshew, and who knows if they were even going to survive if they would have drafted a Shedeur. And I don't think it's still the equation that maybe they draft a rookie in the middle rounds, let's say, just to sit and be there, where 2-3 years from now, let's say they move on or whatever, it doesn't pan out, you have that guy. But it's the right move. And yeah, like you said, now they got to continue to build. You need a running back, add a little bit more a receiver. They've got a good amount of cap space. They got $50 million, not crazy, but puts them around, I think it's about 12th in the NFL because the Jets are, I believe, 10th. So they're 2 behind the Jets. So about 12th. So top 15 in the NFL, top half of the league with the salary cap increasing. Go out, make some moves, continue to add to that offense and give him some more weapons. You mentioned Seattle and the youth movement. That's what it feels like is happening. You get the whole DK Metcalf trade now request, which throws a big loop into all this. I guess my biggest thing with Seattle is it feels like obviously they weren't going to want to pay Geno long term. We have to see what their backup plan is because it feels like now if Seattle, it feels like they have to get Darnold at this point, right? Because if they move on from Geno, who is the quarterback that's going to replace him and put up the production that he was putting up? It's not going to be Justin Fields. It's not going to be Jameis Winston. It's not going to be any of those other free agents. It feels like Seattle at this point's got to go all in for Darnold, right?
Yeah, they have to be anticipate making a splash because it's no way you go from Geno and willingly ship him off for Kirk Cousins, respectfully, who looked awful this year. So I mean, Seattle is kind of they're in this weird spot right now where you're not super bad to the point where it's like, let's ship everybody off, let's rebuild from the ground up. Yeah. But they're kind of in that spot where it's just like, usually we're sitting around 8 or 9 wins and we're still fighting for a playoff spot in week, 15, 16. And maybe they think Geno is not the guy to get them over and they want to go elsewhere. But if they are going to go elsewhere, it has to be Darnold. Like considering if you are trying to clean house and just say DK does get dealt anytime soon or during the draft, I mean, you don't want to bring a rookie into that situation without obviously your best receiver. Some can argue JSN, but Lockett is gone. Metcalf might be gone. Like, you don't want to bring a rookie into that's basically working with nothing. So it has to be a Darnold, a veteran that has the opportunity to work with, I don't want to say less, but can work with some youth. You want to kind of balance it out. Guy that's been in the league with some experience. Let's get some youth in there. Let JSN take over that receiving core, mentor the younger guys under him. You obviously got Kenneth Walker still, I think, a very phenomenal back. So, I mean, it looks like for Seattle's sake, they are trying to get young, but they still want to remain competitive at the same time. But it's Sam Darnold or nobody for Seattle.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The only upgrade over Geno Smith, or the only possible upgrade over Geno Smith, would be Darnold. That's out there. You can't, like you said, Kirk Cousins, who can't move, and that's not going to work. Even though it's cheap, it's not going to work, especially if you want to go through this youth movement and continue to stay young and get younger. Kirk Cousins is not that guy. Not saying Darnold's young, but he's in the prime of his career now, and he's hit kind of the point where he's almost doing what Geno did, right? Failed with the Jets, went to one or two teams after that, and now, hit his stride with Minnesota. I guess my biggest question is with Darnold, not really Seattle, but just Darnold in general. Like, how much of Kevin O'Connell and that offense you think led to him having success? Because I have started to think about this the last couple of days, as especially once Geno got traded, because now, if you're Seattle, you're gonna have to make a big splash for him if that's what you want to do. I'm starting to wonder. We had a great year with Darnold, but I think now that the dust has settled, you do start to wonder, like, is it really smart for a team to invest a lot in him and expect him with a defensive-minded head coach? They do have a brand new offensive coordinator, but what is he without Kevin O'Connell? We don't. How much of last year was Kevin O'Connell, I guess, is the simple way to put that.
And I mean, you don't want to take up away from what he did in Minnesota, but I mean, at the same time, let alone O'Connell, we obviously know, very hot commodity, very great head coach. We've seen what he's been able to accomplish since being in Minnesota. But you say how much of it is O'Connell, but how much is it the weapons? You arguably, and I think I've said this before, you go through paper on, every team in the NFL. Minnesota arguably may have a top 3 unit in terms of, offensive weapons. So, again, not trying to take away from Darnold, but it's like, who will step into that and not be good when Justin Jefferson is down there somewhere? Jordan Addison is down there somewhere. You got TJ Hawkinson back this year, who wasn't healthy to begin the year, but now he's going into next year completely healthy. Aaron Jones, who is a little bit, of older age, just had career highs in both carries and rushing yards. So he had the best year that he's ever had as a pro, arguably. So you look at all the weapons that Minnesota has, and you're kind of this might be Minnesota's point of also moving on, of where, like, hey, we can get somebody to step in and do what you did for a lot cheaper. So for Darnold, it's so tough because he revived his career. He looked great. And I mean, we had that Minnesota team at 7 wins and they doubled it. But when it's all said and done, nothing got done with what they had. So at the end of that year, it kind of looked less of like, hey, this is what O'Connell has done. And it's looking more like, hey, this is what Darnold won't do. He won't get us over that hump. He looked like a ghost against the Rams. So it's so tough, again, for a Seattle team. And to your point of, do you really want to invest if you might not bring back a Metcalf? And Lockett is gone. JSN, everything I just said, he doesn't have the same pieces and the same weapons. So what might you possibly bring in to replicate what Sam Darnold can do, not from a head coach standpoint, an offensive coordinator standpoint, but just from a weapon standpoint?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think, too, just with Minnesota, I mean, look at the other quarterbacks. I mean, mainly Kirk Cousins. He leaves that team, leaves Justin Jefferson, leaves KOC, leaves that offense, goes to Atlanta, got benched for Michael Penix. I mean, even Josh Dobbs for a couple weeks looked manageable in that offense. What else? Jaron Hall, right? What was that?
Jaron Hall.
Yeah, he looked manageable. I think that was Atlanta he came in? Or no, was that? No, that was Josh Dobbs who came in Atlanta. But Jaron Hall played. There was, I mean, heck, even Nick Mullins, I remember against the Bengals last year on the Saturday game, I think it was one of the Saturday games, was slinging it a little bit. Doesn't take much. It's almost like the conversation we have with San Francisco, and when they had their weapons with Brock Purdy during that time, it was almost like, you could throw anybody in there, they're going to have success with Debo, Ayuk, CMC, Kittle, all those guys around him. Good offensive line. Trent Williams holding down the blind side left tackle. Anybody can win with that team. Feels the same thing with Minnesota. I mean, win in a different extent, win in the regular season and then fall apart, because that's what happens. Yeah, I don't know. I want to see Darnold do well. He's so 50-50, because I could easily see him go out there. I don't think he's going to replicate what he did last year. That's asking a lot. But is it crazy to say he can go out there and throw, I don't think he's going to throw 35 touchdowns again, but say he could throw 26, 27 touchdowns and kind of, again, go on this Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith pass where he does have a true resurgence, yeah, it could happen. But I could also see him next year getting a big contract and just falling flat. Almost like, remember Nick Foles in Jacksonville?
Oh, yeah.
I could see that with Darnold. I feel like there's no in between. You're either going to get him, he's going to get 28 touchdown, 9 pick, 4,000 yard Sam Darnold, or you're going to get benched middle of the year. After this season, we're going to be talking about Seattle looking for whoever gets Darnold, looking for a new quarterback.
I mean, just also kind of looking ahead, let's say he does land in Seattle. What doesn't help is the fact that facing that Rams team twice a year that made you look, completely awful. And, I kind of say that because kind of back to the point of in Seattle, you don't got to do too much. You don't have to win, 14 games. If you win 14 games in Seattle, you got to be the one seed in NFC, right? So, I mean, well, you're definitely going to win the division. Probably should be the one seed. Obviously, other teams look so phenomenal this year where you didn't even get the one seed. But, 14 win to Seattle, I mean, you are like, you're the guy. So they don't need that from him, though. What they need from him, and I think it's, again, 8-9 wins in that division, keep us competitive. As long as we're fighting for a playoff spot, rounds week 15, week 16, we trust you. But looking how that division is, that NFC North, I mean, I just don't think Darnold, with that quarterback play over there, can get the job done. And I mean, this is coming off a year where Caleb Williams looked terrible. He will only get better. Chicago will only get better. So I think for Darnold to, kind of continue to elevate his game, Seattle would be a good fit. I just don't think Minnesota would happen for him.
Yeah, I agree. And in Minnesota too. I mean, do they go the Rodgers route? JJ McCarthy. I feel like so many people have just forgotten about JJ McCarthy. Like, the guy is here. He's in the NFL. He's on the roster. I know maybe you don't want to rush him back, but he had a year to sit and watch. I mean, I don't know. I'm surprised there's not more on the possible JJ McCarthy playing, right? Or I guess you go with the veteran and have him play a little more preseason and maybe that, but
it's that's a tough situation too. I mean, like you said, you don't want to rush him back, but you were not bringing in Aaron Rodgers, hypothetically speaking, for JJ to sit for a whole entire year. Like, what is the point of that? You just wasted 2 years of this guy's career. They're in a tough spot.
It's the best you're going to get out of Aaron Rodgers and the Vikings is what you got last year out of Darnold. A very good regular season and probably losing the wild card game. Yep. Maybe Rodgers can't elevate anybody right now. But, yeah, it'll be interesting. Feels like Seattle's the landing spot. DK stuff, of course, is interesting. A lot on the plate there in Seattle. Team that was close to making the playoffs last year, got a lot of work to do in this offseason. If they have some missteps, this team could spiral very fast. So a lot to look there in Seattle. Want to move on now. Other big news that broke earlier today. Myles Garrett, after requesting a trade, for a while, it seemed like wasn't budging. Cleveland said, we're not trading you. Myles Garrett, from his side of things, it feels like both sides were kind of standing their ground. But Myles Garrett saw the money and said, you know what? I'm going to stay here. He agreed on a record contract, $40 million per year. It includes $123.5 million. It's a 4-year deal, $123.5 million in guaranteed. He is the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. Some crazy, by the way, I just got to say this. There's been some crazy contracts already given out. Linebacker markets going off. Bolton had a contract extension today. Did you see Tutu Atwell from the Rams? 1 year, $10 million guaranteed. It's ridiculous. He's a fourth receiver. That was crazy. So wide receiver markets all over the place. This resets the defensive end market, which obviously plays a role we'll get to here in Micah Parsons. Max Crosby got the big deal just a couple days ago. But Myles Garrett's back with the Browns. And I don't know. Look, if you're a Browns fan, you're ecstatic because your best player, your face of the franchise, is back. The best pass rusher in the NFL is back. But it's just interesting from Myles Garrett's perspective. I know we were talking about this a little bit off air. Requests to trade, says how much he wants to win. But, yeah, the money talks. He sees the money, and he's like, you know what? I'll stay here. And I know we both talking about it off air. Maybe the Browns sold them on, hey, look, we're going to get a quarterback. We're going to turn this thing around. Trust us. We really like whether that's a Cam Ward, whoever that might be. What are your thoughts on this? Definitely a big twist in what felt like was heading towards a pretty long standoff.
For me, I'm happy because he doesn't end up anywhere in the NFC East. That
Yeah.
obviously is not, in the Cowboys helmet. But
yeah, I'll say that too. If the Browns did look to trade him, Buffalo is a destination. So I'm happy he's nowhere near the AFC East either.
As far as I'm confused. And we've talked about this before where, it kind of feels like Cleveland is, again, I'm going to continue to use this term, in no man's land, where, you can promise a quarterback, but where you look at the options, if it's not a Sam Darnold, which we've looked at the free agent list, both of us, it's Sam Darnold, and it's tremendous drop-off after Sam Darnold. And even respectfully with the year he had, having Sam Darnold on that list as a top priority free agent, you're kind of scratch your head. You're kind of like, oh, that's not, this hasn't been a guy that's been in the league for 8, 9, 10 years, dominated. Like he struggled, and he just happened to have a good year. So, for Cleveland's case and for Myles Garrett's case, who is that going to be? Are you going to make a big splash for Sam Darnold, and is he going to come over and change the culture? Which I kind of in Seattle's case, I think again in that division. I think he can keep them afloat in that division with that defense that just fell off. Like Cleveland's defense is still pretty decent. They got to just figure it out. So, I think he can come over and he can fix things. But for Myles Garrett, I mean, you sit here, you tell him that you're getting a quarterback. Is it Darnold? Are you drafting a guy? Like, what are we doing? And you look at the other holes of Cleveland. They still need receiver help desperately. Yeah. They still need running back desperately. Nick Chubb's a free agent. So it's just like, okay, great, you got a quarterback. What are we doing everything else? Like, what else besides a quarterback are they going to do to make Myles Garrett not regret his decision 2 to 3 years from now?
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny. Knowing the Browns, that quarterback that they sold Myles Garrett on will be Kirk Cousins or something. It'll be.
Wouldn't be surprised.
We're going to get Myles. We're going to get you a quarterback. We got a lot of names, and they go the cheap route and Kirk Cousins. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think they'll probably go the draft route, but Darnold's certainly a name to look for, of course. They need receiver help. They need to figure out the running back. Chubb, hits the open market. They got a lot of work. I mean, they don't have much cap space either. They're only working with about $12 million in cap space, which is near the bottom of the league. Even after the salary cap increase to 279 and 0.2, I think it was, is the official number. They have a lot of work. I mean, you got to figure out the quarterback. That's the biggest thing. Number one, if you can figure out the quarterback, I think he can elevate maybe some of the receivers potentially. I think Jerry Jeudy's solid.
Yeah. You're not winning the Super Bowl with Jerry Jeudy as your number one, though.
No, you're not winning the Super Bowl with Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore as your 1 and 2. Although I believe Moore is free agent, actually.
I think so.
But you're not winning at the Super Bowl. You're not winning anything. It's a good chance you're not even winning 6 games, 7 games with that. Hypothetically, what, you draft a receiver or draft a quarterback, draft a receiver, or do you go, let's say, sign Darnold? It might actually be better because they have so many holes. You sign Darnold, and then you go best player available, first round. Say it's Travis Hunter. And then you go double up, go receiver second round.
Oh, that's actually, yeah. I think they should probably go Darnold again. Make a push for him. See what you can do. Mm-hmm. See who you can bring in. You sign we mentioned Nick Chubb, and looking at the 3 most attractive names as far as running back free agents, it was Aaron Jones, which is obviously gone. Nick Chubb, which who knows what his future might be with Cleveland, and J.K. Dobbins. Anybody else is an RB2, you're not it's not going to be your 3-down back. So I think you try to get Chubb back on a cheap deal. Because, I mean, I know injuries. I think he's played 10 games over the last 2 seasons. But you look at, I believe it's 22. The last year he was healthy, the type of year he had. I think he had 1,500 yards, 1,522 to be exact, if I remember correctly. So you bring Chubb back, who might be willing to sign back for a cheap, team-friendly deal, considering he spent his entire time in Cleveland. You got Darnold. And, you go get best available in round 1, whoever that may be, and round 2, round 3. That's when you continue to beef up that offense, because not going to kind of ramble about it, but we talked about it last episode. So much talent at the running back and receiver position that you can find in 1 through 7. So from that, I mean, it's going to start with first getting that quarterback, because it doesn't matter. You can draft and just ranting, but you can draft Junkins, Hunter, McMillan, Burden all on the same roster. But hey, if you have a Walgreens worker throwing him the ball for 17 games, you're not going to win nothing. So it's going to start with getting that quarterback situated.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like you've seen those mock drafts where people, like, whatever the team's weakness is, they'll pick the same draft pick for every single pick. It's like the Browns, we're going to see just whatever. I think 6, 7 receivers. They'll just take one every single round. So one of them got a hit, right? And the law of averages, something's at some point they've got to find a quarterback. At some point, they're going to go Kirk Cousins. Watch.
I tell you, I have a
at
friend
that point,
who's
it's
a Browns
just
fan, so
it's just straight torture at that point.
If it's Kirk Cousins, I think we all know this guy. That one Browns fan that has the jersey with all the quarterbacks they've had since like his lifetime. I can't wait to see Kirk Cousins added to that name if that's the route they decide to go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they got a lot of work to do. I mean, you're a 3-win team. I also think too, just from the Browns, and maybe this sways them one way or another. Kevin Stefanski's now been there a couple years. Of course, got them to the playoffs, with Flacco and that run. He's done some good things. I still think ownership and Stefanski, I still think they don't have full control. I think Stefanski and the front office should have a little bit more control. I think ownership is very middlesome over there, similar to, of course, what the Jets deal with day in and day out with Woody Johnson. I think that's similar in Cleveland. If you let the football people make football decisions, I think you could see different results. My big thing is, like, what's the leash on Kevin Stefanski? And that could impact their draft pick. Are the Browns in a situation? Is Stefanski in a situation where, like, if you win 3 games again this year, right?
Got to be on the hot seat. It has to be.
So do you take Darnold? Do you spend the money on Darnold just because he's a little more proven, or do you put your chips in the middle? And I don't know. I doubt Ward doesn't go 1, whether it's the Giants trading up for him or Tennessee just taking him. You put your chips in the middle for Shedeur at 2. I mean, or how do you play that? Because if he's coaching for his job this year, you're probably going to want to Darnold somebody like that, as opposed to a rookie who you're banking on just hoping that he pans out. Especially Shedeur. He's such an unknown. Cam Ward, I think, a lot more confidence. But
I honestly think that needs to be a front office discussion. And I never thought about it, from that point of view. But, I mean, you got to kind of sit down with him, and you're just like, hey, if we go Darnold, you have a year, maybe a year and a half to figure it out. You got to win more than 3 games. Like that, you just can't possibly do that. If you go with a rookie, we're going to give you 2.5. Hopefully gel him, hopefully see what we can make shake and see if we can win some games. But I just think it's so unfair on his end when, if you bring in a rookie quarterback and that rookie quarterback does absolutely nothing when the talent on the roster isn't what it's supposed to be. Like, it's another Gerard Mayo case all over again. So, I mean, for that sake, they got to be kind of lenient with him. You look at just so many unfortunate things for Cleveland. And, I mean, he didn't sign Deshaun Watson. I don't think he wanted Deshaun Watson. No. So you basically gave him the short end of the stick to deal with Deshaun Watson, over the last few years who was terrible. So, you have to do something to help him prove that he can win games. It has to be Darnold. I think you at the end of the day you want to look at the future, but it probably has to be Darnold, and you just go get best available on the board at 2.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think so too. Jimmy Haslam and the Haslam family, they're not great. I think most Browns fans would agree with that. I think, to be honest, I think if it wasn't ownership, Watson probably would have been benched
So yeah.
weeks before he did. You could tell. You watch some of the press conferences with Stefanski. I mean, he was biting his tongue, trying to not to tell him how much that wasn't his decision. You could tell he just did not want Deshaun Watson anywhere near a football field, which rightfully so. If you watched a minute's too much. You watch one pass to Deshaun Watson. If you watched him drop back once, you knew it was over. Not that I don't think Jameis would have got them anywhere, but yeah. I mean, look, he got them to the playoffs with Flacco. He got them to the playoffs with Baker Mayfield. He's done a lot of impressive things. He's kind of started the Baker Mayfield resurgence in a way, like the end, right? He had some success in the end, then bounces around Carolina and now Tampa, of course, and then the Rams there, led the comeback, 2 years ago? It's crazy that Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold were on the Panthers together. But yeah, I mean, now you see what Baker Mayfield did. Could Stefanski have that same type of success with a guy like Darnold, who's in that similar situation, looking to really revive his career more? I think it's possible. But yeah, it's interesting. It's similar to what we talked about the Giants. It's a regime that's on the hot seat, so they have to balance you want to look for the future a little bit, but you also might not be here to make moves for the future. So do you go with a rookie and put all your faith in him, or do you go with a Rodgers, sign a Russell Wilson, somebody like that who his ceiling's pretty low, but the floor is much higher than a Shadur, a Cam Ward, whose ceiling might be higher, but you have no clue what the floor is. It's a tough line you got to walk.
And I'm kind of glad you brought that up. I mean, I feel like bringing a rookie quarterback right now is so much more difficult than it used to be, where it was, you draft a guy, he sits a few years, and after that, he kind of takes over and, kind of like the Aaron Rodgers arc. But now you got rookie quarterbacks, just Jaden Daniels and Stroud and, Dak his first year in 16, where these quarterbacks step in instantly successful and career just takes off from there. And, that's what you want from everyone. But for teams, you're not going to always get that result. Patrick Mahomes set for a few years.
Yeah.
So it's so tough, and it's really just a difficult situation. But for the Browns, for the Giants, just the two teams we just kind of just mentioned, you're not in win now mode. I mean, not in your division, not with what you got going on. You are not in win now. So does it really make sense to get a vet when it's not like you are a 9-10 win team and you just missed out on the playoffs? You are terrible. You might as well just build from the ground up, build the new foundation, or build a foundation because you never had one to begin with. Build a foundation and just, kind of how we seen Kansas City did. You just hopefully something great turns out and you take a few pieces and you grow.
Yeah. And I also think too, with Dak, Stroud, even Daniels this year, those guys that, step in right away, a lot more talent around them than what the Browns and Giants are working with, right? The Giants have Malik Neighbors, but outside of that, Wan'Dale Robinson's okay. But again, we're talking about a playoff team. Wan'Dale Robinson's probably not a number 2 on a playoff team. Darius Slayton's set to hit the open market. I don't foresee the Giants bringing him back. Maybe they do. I don't know. I've been tracking Darius Slayton just from a Jet perspective, not really from the Giants angle. I don't know how much of there is interest there, but Slayton, let's say he's gone. They're also walking into much worse situations. Same thing with Cleveland. Jerry Jeudy's not a one on a playoff team. Maybe a wild card team, but not anything more than that. And if Elijah Moore goes, who's your 2? Cedric
Tillman.
And then, I mean, that's terrible.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy? You feel for him. If you would have told me or told any of us 3 years ago that Nick Chubb would be a free agent and the Browns, like he would just be a free agent, there would have been so many teams going after him. It's
Yeah.
just, disappointing, obviously, what's happened the last 2 years with the injuries or the one injury that sidelined him for a good chunk of the last 2 seasons. But it's disappointing. But either way, I guess one final piece here before we stay in the division and move on to some field stuff. How do you feel this impacts the Parsons stuff? I will continue to say it. I don't understand why there's so many teams, and the Jets right now are and I'm not complaining, but the Jets right now are doing this a little bit with Garrett Wilson, who I think they should extend, and they're also doing a little bit with Jamie and Sherwood. Like, I don't know why these teams wait until like the market resets to then sign players. Sign them before there's these big contracts so you can get them at a cheaper rate as opposed to waiting. I will never understand that. Teams do that all the time. And here we are, with the Cowboys. The Parsons, the offseason for the Cowboys every year, there's always something obviously going on. But how do you feel about how this affects his value?
I mean, that front office has put their hand on the stove 3 consecutive off seasons and still doesn't realize it's going to burn you every time you do. So it's honestly not a surprise. They did it with Dak and wonder why Dak got the money that he got. And they did it with CD. Now they're doing it with Parsons. And I mean, I know there were the free agents, you look at the free agents, we're just talking internal. Obviously, there's some guys you want to bring back. Jordan Lewis, for instance. DeMarcus Lawrence could possibly be one back. It's some guys that you want to get some deals done. Obviously, Osa as well that we just extended. So it's like, okay, great. We know what you're trying to do. At least you are actually making some type of effort going into it. But then again, for Parsons, I mean, you knew about this extension all last season and all off season of it needed to get done. And now in Parsons' case, I mean, it's the same way I kind of felt about Dak, where for Myles Garrett getting his payday and you're Parsons and you kind of look, I'm not necessarily saying I'm extremely better than Myles Garrett, but I'm on the same level as Myles Garrett. I am younger than Myles Garrett. If he just got that, I'm going to be doing this a lot longer. I need my money, and rightfully so. And I think he deserves it. Now, do I think there's been some speculation for the last few weeks that Dallas might trade him and all this because of the market price, blah, blah, blah. I don't think they're trading Micah Parsons. I think they're going to, deal with it. They're going to pay him the $40 million and just hopefully it works out. But what doesn't make me too concerned, they just freed up $53.6 million, I believe, in cap space with reconstruction of CD's contract and Dak's contract.
Yep.
That might be going to Parsons, and also a Parsons deal also frees up 18 more million in cap space with an extension. So I'm not worried about it. Last year when you asked me, I think it was about either Dak or CD. Like, am I sweating yet? Am I nervous? In this case, no, I'm not. I think I'm all right. I think they're going to get something done, and I think it could be as early as Wednesday.
Yeah. I'm curious about one free agent with the Cowboys. You think Jordan Lewis is back?
I hope so. I really like Jordan Lewis. I mean, you look at we had such a good secondary room. Gilmore, Lewis, Bland, Diggs. I think Lewis is going to be back. I hope so. I mean, he last year sounded like a 1 year, $2.3 million, I think. So, he's cheap. You don't have to pay him too much. But I think he deserves $1 million contract. I mean, you look at what he's done since being in the Cowboys uniform. He had his best season this past season, 71 total tackles, which is a career high. And he just adds so many different things to that defense. And I know the numbers as far as pass deflections and interceptions and all that type of stuff might not jump off the charts, but sometimes it's about that energy that you bring to a locker room. And Jordan Lewis brings that energy. He's one of the rare guys we drafted from Michigan that actually worked out. So, I mean, you got your pieces at corner. You're going to rock with Diggs and Bland. I think you keep Lewis, and I mean, I think you jail that into possibly the best secondary in football.
Yeah.
It's only right.
Yeah, I've gone to like Jordan Lewis a little bit more, been just scouting him out for the Jets at cornerback too. But yeah, I agree with you with Lewis. a lot of people just in the NFL in general, and this same thing with edge rushers. A lot of people just look at the sacks,
Yeah.
and if they don't have a lot of sacks, they're like, "Oh, he's not good." A lot of people just look at the interceptions, look at the pass breakups. There's a lot more that goes into it. I also think sometimes there's certain cornerbacks that you have to watch them play to fully appreciate what they are all about. There's also times too. There's not really. This isn't a box score stat where it's kind of more advanced, I guess, numbers that the normal fan won't look at, but how many times they're being targeted, all that stuff, what their completion percentages when against targeted, and just looking at some of the PFF numbers with Jordan Lewis, really good. For the contract that he was getting, really good. I mean, he was 14th in the NFL last year in coverage grade. There's 32 cornerback ones. He was 14th as a cornerback too. So you're getting a guy that's at times can provide kind of cornerback one upside in some areas, and then be that cornerback two, and a good steady veteran has been healthy really. I think except the 1 year.
Yeah, 1 year he was some injury, but kind of to add on. Sorry to cut you off there as well.
Oh, no, you're good.
Just to add on, he also is great in the box, and again, that is something you're not going to see on the stat sheet. You have to turn on the film and watch Jordan Lewis, but he is not afraid to come up and tackle and get involved in the run game, which is such a big part and what you want from a corner. And, I was aware of the PFF grades. I added that in my article that just got published about him being 14th. But what people kind of don't realize is crazy about that is he's not even the cornerback too. He's the slot guy. Like, he's our slot corner. So for him to rank, that in playing in the slot, where obviously you are not targeted that much and you are more of a run stopper, and you're doing so many different things. You had a very great year to be playing on such a minimal contract. So I mean, if that front office is smart, you got to bring Jordan Lewis back, and if they don't, it will be a lot of teams that will be very happy to have him in that cornerback room.
Yeah, 100%. He's good veteran, good locker room guy, a name to look for a lot of teams. Cowboys as well, of course, bringing him back. All right, let's get into Fields, shall we? Talk about Darnold a lot today already. Talked a lot of quarterbacks. Geno, Darnold, Fields. Other name on the market, or rather, Geno, Darnold. That was it. Kirk Cousins. Other name on the market, Justin Fields. Feels like it's between two teams, Jets and Steelers. That's what it feels like. What are your thoughts on Fields? Fields he's gaining steam. I think a lot of people from different teams are warming up to the possibility of him. Very interesting to see what happens in Pittsburgh. Very interesting what happens there. If it's not Fields, if it's not Russ, who is it? I mean, if it's not Fields, who is it? I don't think they're bringing back Russ. I think if it's anything, it's Fields. This is where this week's going to be really interesting, where he lands, and then wherever he doesn't land, what's next for those quarterback needy teams, especially what's next for Pittsburgh. Last year we've talked about the numbers a lot. It was 4-2 in the 6 games that he played before Russ coming in, and played well. And obviously his legs are a big part of his game, were a big part of his game last year. He had 289 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns, 62 carries, which was big for just 6 games starting at 5 touchdowns, 1,106 passing yards. We know what Fields is all about. This is a big time for Fields though, because this is where, if he wants to have that Darnold, Mayfield, Geno renaissance, it's gonna probably be with this contract. Is that Pittsburgh? Is it the Jets? Is it somebody else? What are your thoughts on the Fields market?
This is going to be an insane thing that I say, but Fields has Lamar Jackson upside. He will not be Lamar Jackson. I am not saying in any case or what scenario he reaches Lamar Jackson level. I mean, I don't know if we're going to ever see another Lamar Jackson, honestly. But what I mean by that is, in his time in Chicago, the few games in Pittsburgh, we know what his rushing ability is. And it's like, if you can get Justin Fields' rushing ability that we have seen with Chicago and in Pittsburgh, but you can throw that type of passer he was at Ohio State and bring them together, Justin Fields is going to be a hell of a quarterback. it's just his situations have been so unfortunate. Because I mean, if Fields had that offense that the Bears had this year, I think Justin Fields is still in the NFL. I mean, still with Chicago right now, and they are a 11-12 win team. If I'm not even gonna talk about Pittsburgh, and I'm exhausted talking about Pittsburgh and what
he's
like.
Fields has gotten the role, not to cut you off, but Fields has gotten the role into the stick.
Mm.
He had Matt Eberflus and a terrible offensive line in Chicago. Leave, they get Ben Johnson, and then he has Arthur Smith in Pittsburgh and an offense that hasn't been able to get up to a modern day offense since they've never been a modern day offense. They're still in the Chuck Noll era of the steel curtain.
That is literally the thing. The last time Pittsburgh offense still looks like you wake up every morning, you get the newspaper from outside, and you roll your windows down with the little thing like this, and like that's Pittsburgh offense. Yeah. It's so outdated, and I'm not spending more time on it. We've done it enough, and I know we're gonna do it more during this offseason, but yeah, I mean Fields has had the short end of the stick for his whole entire career. I mean, I think at the end of the day, college doesn't matter. Look at Trevor Lawrence, but we act like Justin Fields is respectfully Anthony Richardson, where he just can't throw the ball at all. Justin Fields can throw the ball. It's been unfortunate for him. So I think he does have that Lamar Jackson type upside. That depending on if it's Pittsburgh, let's say he does land in Pittsburgh, and George Pickens figures it out, and you get some other weapons that is not Calvin Austin, and I can't even remember the number 2 option. Like that's how bad it is. If they make some moves and they kind of build that offense around Justin Fields and not make Justin Fields adjust his game to the offense, if that makes sense, we can see Pittsburgh be successful. I mean, if Russ was able to do what he did with that team this year, I'm sure Justin Fields can make something happen if he has the right talent.
Yeah, I agree. I think you got to just let Fields just play, let him do his thing. I think the offense that Fields is in, whoever that is next, it's got to emulate. Well, you mentioned Lamar in Baltimore. It's got to kind of emulate that Baltimore offense. A lot of RPOs, load up on the offensive line, get good blocking tight ends, and downhill, run it. I have him roll out a lot. I guess Najee Harris, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm with you. I'm hoping that Pittsburgh does something in this offseason that can give us a reason to talk about something different in their offense. Like what maybe it is bringing back Fields, and you could talk about the potential, but I don't know. Like I don't even know. I don't know what it would take for the outsider to view Pittsburgh's offenses back to modern day, other than them just proving it on the field.
Here's the thing too. Now, again, this is so tough. So you look at this Pittsburgh offense at the moment, if nothing changes. We're talking Najee Harris. We are talking Christian Kirk that just got, dealt to Pittsburgh, and we're talking George Pickens. Christian Kirk injuries, I know, but instant upgrade over – was it – wait, no, or was it Houston? I think I might be thinking the wrong thing. Hold on. I might be completely wrong on the Christian Kirk thing. I think I'm off the rails.
Kirk to – what was that?
I don't know why I thought it was Pittsburgh. I think because last year it was a possibility and he broke the collarbone. Christian Kirk went to Houston. I'm completely off. That goes to show you how bad it is with Pittsburgh's offense. You're making moves for them that they probably should have made. All right, my apologies. Okay, so it's George Pickens and Najee Harris. It's like that's it. Nobody's winning with that.
No, and that's what I'm interested in. How much does Fields value, I guess, continuity and going back to a team that he already knows the system? And how much does he value going to a team with potentially more talent or at least more potential? I mean, George Pickens and Najee Harris, it feels like have kind of hit their ceiling, especially Najee Harris. I'd like to see Pickens with consistent quarterback play, but I don't know. I don't know. I think he's going to be kind of a diva has your crazy catch every once in a while that everyone's going to highlight, and then a lot of bad that's for some going to get, swiped under the rug. But yeah, I mean, they're boring. They're just so boring. And And I like Tomlin a lot, but everything about that team right now is just boring. It's the same name, same team, year in and year out. The big coaching staff change they made was bringing in Arthur Smith. Oh, great. Let's bring in a guy that in 3 years at Atlanta won 7 games every single year. And Arthur Smith, by the way, the game has passed him by. He has not done anything since his time in Tennessee. Which was years ago.
Again, it's tough because this is the only team we feel this about. But again, I wake up on a Sunday morning knowing Pittsburgh plays football, and I feel like I need to go outside and get my newspaper and put coal in my home, my first ever heater in my home. Like, it just feels so old fashioned and it's so outdated. But you really have to applaud Mike Tomlin because you are playing with an offense from the 30s and you've never had a losing season.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
That's the thing. They're so mediocre. They're in such a they're in such a mediocre spot. They're so far away from being a Super Bowl. They're far away from just as far away from a Super Bowl title as they are from the number 1 overall pick.
And that's exactly what I said. I was about to say. So yeah, you definitely have mentioned that before. They are just stuck in the middle.
Yeah,
500 stuck in the middle. I mean, that's it.
It's the worst spot to be in. Worst spot to be in. Where do you think Fields ends up?
Probably gonna be Pittsburgh. I think they don't have a lot of better options. So at least bring somebody back in that's familiar with the organization enough and the system, I guess.
Yeah, it feels like for Pittsburgh, I think they'll take a shot at Darnold, but if they know they can't get him, I think they're gonna quickly go back to Fields. I don't see them going after like Rodgers. I don't see happening in Pittsburgh. And you talk about trying to modern day your offense, that'd be going back even further with Rodgers, because that's the biggest problem with Rodgers right now is his system is just the NFL game's caught up to it. What he likes to run, what he likes to do. He's doesn't like to go under center much, doesn't like to run a bunch of play action. Does not work in today's NFL game. So that'd be doing the opposite. I think Darnold's probably the only Darnold would probably be the only one in front of Fields on their list. Like, logically, you're not going to go Kirk Cousins. God, please, no. If they go Kirk Cousins, take him out do not televise them next year. God, you have a quarterback that can't move.
For Sam Darnold's sake, oh my goodness. I mean, we've said, just before all the moves, we said maybe the Raiders. Now we're talking about Seattle. Now we're talking about Pittsburgh. His agent might pull off one of the greatest heists we've seen since Trevor Lawrence did it. And I don't think Darnold's going to be completely awful. I think he finally has put it together and he's going to have a pretty good season. But I mean, for Sam Darnold to be the hot commodity in 2025, what happened to the game I love? Like, what is going on in our league?
Yeah, it's crazy. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, 2 suffering Jet fans. I was like, if you would have told me, 5 years ago that Sam Darnold would be the hot quarterback on the market, I would have been like, man, so that probably means that he had a good run with the Jets. Nope. You would have told me that Geno Smith would be going through this renaissance, or I don't know. Geno Smith's a little different because it's been so long. Like Smith, it took longer. Darnold's renaissance or big seasons happening earlier. But, I mean, geez. Yeah. And you're talking about Trevor Lawrence's heist. I think that's a perfect segue into Jacksonville. They're selling off pieces. They are moving on from a lot of pieces. I guess from their perspective, dead weight. But they are making a lot of moves, a lot of just moving on. James Gladstone moves on from Evan Ingram, moves on from Christian Kirk, or actually, rather, traded Christian Kirk to Houston.
I believe it was Houston. I don't know why I'm thinking Pittsburgh, but I believe it was Houston.
Yeah. Looked like they were going to move on from him, either trade him or release him, and they ended up trading him to Houston. So, Houston sort of finds their, I don't know, Diggs maybe replacement. I don't know. I mean, you're looking at Nico Collins, hoping Tank Dell can come back healthy at some point, maybe this year. And then Kirk's your 3, if that's the way it is. But yeah, they're cleaning house. They're moving on from a lot of pieces. Of course, you still have the question at running back. You move on from Kirk. You move on from Evan Ingram. They're hard at work.
For an organization that so much for the organization that really felt this was the franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're done. I mean, the ideal of ETN probably being shipped at the deadline this past season kind of floated around for some time, and that obviously didn't happen. So, I mean, I obviously think ETN might be out of Duval County as well, and he probably gets moved. And they just released a corner. I lost his name. Jacksonville did just release a corner as well that is also hitting the open market. So it's like they are completely cleaning house. But you got one problem. You're $55 million man.
Yep.
And I know for the people that have watched this all year, it seems like I'm just the creator of the Trevor Lawrence hate club and whatever the case is. But I've spit nothing but facts in terms of Trevor Lawrence and the lack of what has been accomplished for this generation of talent since he got in the league. So for Jacksonville, it's like, what are we doing? You got rid of his best target. You got rid of Kirk, which not a surprise. Again, we thought he was supposed to land in Pittsburgh last offseason, but he broke his collarbone. ETN might be gone. So, like, what are you actually doing for your quarterback? Like, why are we getting rid of everybody? What is your end game? I'm confused.
Yeah, it's interesting because they don't have a ton of talent to begin with, and they're moving on. Kirk was, that was going to happen for a while. After year 1 of that contract, he, started to fall apart. But yeah, I mean, they don't have a ton of talent to begin with, and they're already, moving on from talent now. It feels like you probably draft a receiver, right? I mean, they got $60 million. They do have a decent amount of cap space. I believe they are like 8th in the NFL inside the top 10 with $60.9 million. So just a tick under $61 million. So they do have to spend, but I'm interested to see how much James Gladstone, who's moving on from these pieces, how much he wants to spend or more so build through the draft. Do you look at a mid-round receiver, figure out the running back? I mean, the running back's not great because even if you move on from ETN, Tank Bigsby's not any good. You draft, take Genty?
I don't see it happening.
No. And then you probably need help defensive line too. So Graham probably, maybe. I doubt Graham. I think Graham will probably get taken by them at 5, if I had to guess. And you look at their roster, like Gabe Davis is They're really only one. This is the problem with them. Gabe Davis isn't even he was terrible last year. Their only good young piece right now. And their overpaid quarterback's not one of them. Their only good young piece is Brian Thomas Jr. That's it.
Yep.
ETN, Bigsby, not it. You moved on from Kirk. You moved on from Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram was in the prime of his career. He was, he kind of revived his career a little bit. I still don't quite understand it because who's your tight end outside of him? Walker or no, that's left tackle. Brenton
Strange.
Yeah. I mean, who is that guy?
I mean, sometimes you sit back as a fan of your respective team and you're just like, oh, this is the worst. Like, what are we doing? What are we going through? And then you look at other teams like Jacksonville, you're just like, it's not that bad. It could always be so much worse. And this is that scenario where, like you said, your quarterback is disgustingly overpaid. And I don't know, I sound like Stephen A. Smith when it comes to hating on Trevor Lawrence, but it is what it is. Disgustingly overpaid is your quarterback that has accomplished nothing since he's been there. And you're about to give him Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis to throw the ball to next year. I mean, Kirk, I understand getting rid of, but Ingram, who was so reliable for you, you get rid of him. It makes absolutely no sense. So I'm going to be honest with you, off the top of my head, I don't know what the free agent market looks like for the tight end position. So you're not rolling out Brenton Strange to be your tight end one next year. So what are you doing? Are you going to go grab a Harold Fanning maybe in the draft later on? What is the end goal?
Yeah. It's an interesting point because Ingram is more that receiving tight end. So if they want to try and get that one-on-one replacement, Fanning Jr. would be that guy. I mean, do they spend big at a receiver in free agency? This isn't the receiver class to me that you spend big on, though. You know, like the top of the class, Diggs, take a flyer on him. I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense. They need to get younger. They're moving on from some of these veteran pieces. They're looking to get younger. It's just the Gabe Davis contract's going to be ugly, very ugly soon. Yeah. It already is ugly. I felt like there was 2 contracts given out last offseason or was it last off? Hold on. Was it last offseason or the offseason before? Davis was last offseason.
I believe so. If you're talking Calvin Ridley, I think that was last offseason. That's it. That was last offseason as well. Yes.
Calvin Ridley. I was trying to figure out whether that was last offseason, the offseason before that, but he was in Jacksonville the offseason, for the year before that. That was the year coming off the suspension. Fantasy owners had all the problems with him. We went into last year. I remember we talked about it on the show. There was 2 receiver signings, Ridley and Gabe Davis, who were probably both overpaid, and we said one of them was going to fail. And it looks like Gabe Davis is the one that's going to fail. Ridley wasn't great last year, but he still had over 1,000 yards. And Trevor Lawrence is better than what he was working with. He's better than Mason Rudolph. He's better than Will Levis. Yeah. He's better than whoever the heck else they rolled out there. As much as we, bash Trevor Lawrence, Gabe Davis, even though he was injured and Trevor did get hurt, Trevor's better than those guys. Gabe Davis, that contract's horrific. So you got that bad contract. So you potentially move on from him, let's say, next year. I don't know if you can get out of maybe you can get out of it after year 2. And then what? It's Brian Thomas Jr., and if you draft a rookie and hope he develops?
It's almost like they jumped the gun, and that's what it kind of felt like. And I know, obviously, Gabe Davis, growing up actually Seminole County, like 10, 15 minutes away from where I'm at right now, UCF kid, you want to kind of bring him closer to home. It seems like they jumped the gun and gave him a ridiculous contract for the case of being back home, if that makes sense. Yeah. But it's just like, that can't be your option too. Or was it just Josh Allen made him look so good and he got paid?
Yeah.
Because personally, I don't think Gabe Davis is a terrible player. Like, I think somewhere he could be a solid option 3 maybe, or an option 2. On an option 2 team, like it got to be an option 2 team behind Jefferson, CD, or Jamar Chase. Obviously, your top 3, but anywhere else, I mean, as an option 2, I don't think that's winning football.
Yeah, I'd also say this too. Make a good point about Josh Allen because he made Mac Hollins look pretty good this year. Mac Hollins kind of filled like the Gabe Davis role. I think what's going to be interesting with Jacksonville, and I think last year they kind of spent like drunken sailors. I think a lot of it was probably Doug Peterson and that staff kind of knew they were on the hot seat. And after you blow, what were they, 8-3? They blew it, finished 9-8 down the stretch. You kind of knew that after that you needed to try and go all in, like reload and get back to the playoffs. And they made some really crappy decisions with that. Probably also a reason. Kirk, I know, got hurt, but Kirk didn't go. I mean, what was it? The collarbone. So,
yeah.
But they're in an interesting spot. I still think Jacksonville. I could see, I guess, the outline of just trying to build through the draft, similar to what the Rams did, where Gladstone's coming from. But the problem is the quarterback. You can give him Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, and pick whatever tight end you think is great, and then give him whatever. Walter Payton, whatever running back you want to pick, Barry Sanders, and they're not winning with Trevor Lawrence.
Let's see. Tough spot. So they have 10 draft picks this upcoming year. And you look at in need, I mean, offensive line, defensive back, and wide receiver in that order for Jacksonville. So, I mean, right now, if you're Jacksonville and where are they sitting at draft-wise, who do you go with? Like, who do you go
Number
with?
5, yeah, unless if you take a Will Johnson.
Which my buddy
like
who's a
him,
Jags fan has mentioned Will Johnson, but how many times have that worked out? A corner in the top 5, like I don't know.
It's
You also
risky.
don't want to bat some of the best player on the board at the time if that's who lands there.
I doubt it happens, but if Hunter falls, I doubt it happens. It won't happen. I don't think Travis Hunter is going to fall past New England. I could see, actually less likely, I could have seen him falling past the top 3, but with the Myles Garrett extension, I think the Rams or the Browns, rather, if they go with Darnold, are probably going to take best player available. I think the Browns probably would have taken Abdul Carter, but with the extension getting done, that's not going to happen.
I mean, Jacksonville, do they go receiver out of Arizona, McMillan?
They could. I like McMillan a lot. I actually love McMillan. He's a beast.
I do too. He is insane. So, I mean, I know offensive line, defensive back, receiver is what is the need. But, I mean, in that case, do you pair McMillan and Brian Thomas together? You got 2 young pieces. You move Gabe Davis to your 3. You still got, Parker Washington is more your return specialist guy, but can make some plays in the offense. And do you completely just boast that offense up to the point you attack defense in strictly free agency and you just go offensive focus in the draft? I don't know what Jacksonville's going to do, but Gladstone has a proven track record of success. So for Jags fans, you don't want to stress too much because he's proven what he can do. But at some point, you're just like, man, what are we doing right now?
Yeah. You also got Barron from Texas. I think actually PFF ranks him higher than Will Johnson, which is debatable.
That might be a film thing. I don't know. I think I'm going Will Johnson.
I'd go Will Johnson too. Yeah, that's interesting what they'll do.
Jacksonville, man, they're in such a tough spot with everything they got going on.
Yeah,
I mean, they got a lot of picks in the later rounds. They're looking at 2 3rds, 2 4ths, 2 6ths. They can make something work.
Yeah,
it's just are you going to draft the right guys?
Yeah, and they're also in a division that 2 of the other 3 teams don't know what they're doing either. So they do have that working for them. If they were in the AFC North or the AFC West, it'd look a lot worse. But for being honest, they're more than capable of finishing second in the division next year if they make some additions, because the Titans and the Colts are not much better. So anyway, any closing thoughts?
It's a big week. I'm excited. That's it. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. Feels like really kicking off the off season. I know we're already about, a month in. It's been about, I think, exactly a month today since the Super Bowl. So we're a month in.
Yeah.
And next week, we'll have all the free agency reaction. Free agency frenzy, essentially. Every move, we'll break them all down. Any other trades that happens, extensions, we'll be here breaking it all down. So enjoy the week. Going to be a busy week starting up tomorrow. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.